Well, now we move on to this story. The U.S. Supreme Court right now is taking up a really controversial death row case. In 1995, Corey Maples confessed to killing 2 people. He later was convicted of murder, and he was sentenced to death. And here's where we pick up the story. He appealed that ruling on the basis that his first set of lawyers were bad, incompetent. He ended up getting a new legal team, but then there was a paperwork mishap. The lawyers who had been handling his case quit the law firm, and Maples said he was never told that he was suddenly without representation, and the court's clerk never relayed that the court notices on that appeal were coming back unopened. Regardless, the state and federal courts in Alabama say Maples is out of luck and he will be executed. And now the Supreme Court is weighing in, and I have some breaking news from the Associated Press on that. Doug Burns is a former federal prosecutor who's joining us, and Dwane Cates as well is a criminal defense attorney helping us work through this. So, Doug, here's the headline from the Associated Press. The Supreme Court appears likely to rule in favor of Corey Maples. Do you agree with that?
Well, that's interesting. First of all, you got to put this case in a little bit of context, Jenna. The defendant appealed his conviction, and it was affirmed. He then appealed again to the Alabama Supreme Court, and it was affirmed. He then brought what's called a separate collateral attack, and he lost. It was the appeal from that was fouled up with this mailroom error, okay? So the point is, his case had been reviewed twice, and then he was on a collateral attack. He also had a review in federal court, which he lost, and that was affirmed in federal court. So the notion of, that this mailroom error precluded him from appealing in the first place is wrong. Now, having said that, though, there's a 1991 case, and maybe, Darrell could talk about this more, that says that in this situation, the defendant is out of luck where a law firm makes this type of mistake. And I think the Supreme Court took this case because they want to adjust that rule, and I think that's a good thing. I think they should.
So, Dwane, here's the ruling. In 1991, this was Coleman versus Thompson. This is what the Supreme Court brought up, and this is the quote from that ruling in a post-conviction proceeding. So something a similar scenario to this. The petitioner bears the risk for all attorney errors made in the course of representation. Isn't there some sort of personal responsibility here on this man to know whether or not he's being represented?
Well, how can you put personal responsibility on somebody for something they have absolutely no idea was happening? You got to remember, he's locked up in jail. He doesn't get to watch the news. And he assumed that he had these 2 great lawyers from this great New York law firm that were handling his case. I mean, he thought, in an interview, he said he thought he hit the lottery when he got these lawyers. These were great lawyers. And this was more than a mailroom snafu. What happened was these 2 lawyers, in the middle of his case, quit the law firm and went to work somewhere else. And not only did they go to work for somebody else, they went to work at jobs that wouldn't allow them to continue the representation. And when they did that, they didn't notify the Alabama courts, they didn't notify Corey Maples, they didn't notify anybody.
Wait a minute, Doug.
That's why the deadline was missed.
Though. This man is a confessed killer. It's been 15 years that he's behind bars. No one is even arguing whether or not he's a murderer. He had enough personal responsibility to take the lives of 2 people. Okay, maybe he's in prison, but there's emails, there's phone calls. We know what the prison system is like. Doesn't he have some sort of responsibility here to know something about his lawyers?
Jenna, there's a more important point, which is that he had a local lawyer in Alabama, okay, and there's a lot of controversy about that. The ruling where he lost the collateral attack in state court in Alabama was sent to that lawyer in Alabama, okay? Apparently, he put in an affidavit saying, I assumed that the lawyers in New York City were going to take the lead, but by the same token, one could easily argue that he could have communicated that, Dwane, to the defendant.
Dwane, your thoughts on that?
And he absolutely could have communicated that. The problem is the local lawyer in Alabama on these cases is a sham. Alabama does not provide PCR counsel. Like every other state in the nation provides PCR counsel. Alabama
what is PCR counsel?
And, post-conviction relief, the collateral attack that we're talking about. So what happens is now, in order for and they rely on out-of-state pro bono lawyers to help these people. The state doesn't fund it. And so what happens is they have to have a local lawyer so they can appear what's called pro hoc vice, sign in. Right. But that local lawyer does nothing in the case. All they do is sign a piece of paper so that the pro bono lawyers from out of state can come in and handle the case. That's all they do.
A quick final question, though.
And he never knew, and the local lawyer never knew that the out of state lawyers quit.
So quick final question, though, if I could, Dwane. Let me just jump in and ask you this, because I gave Doug the first word here.
Sure.
Even if he gets to appeal, he's been convicted, and he's in multiple appeal processes. That conviction is upheld, that he will be executed. So even if he's able to do this and go ahead and has the appeal process again, will that even change the outcome?
All right, good point.
Well, here's the issue. If you're going to kill people as a punishment for a crime, they should at the very least, get to go through the process of making sure that things were correct. Now, he is a confessed killer, but the vote on whether or not he should be sentenced to death was 10-2, and if it had been 9-3, he wouldn't have got the death penalty.
It's an interesting case.
So we're not talking about making him innocent. We're talking about whether or not he should be put to death.
And that's the issue at hand. The Supreme Court has taken this up. We don't have a ruling yet. 20 states, by the way, are supporting Alabama, saying that if this goes through the Supreme Court, it'll add a new complexity to a death penalty ruling, and it'll add to further delays. Of course, the other side, as Dwane points out, is the system working here? And that's the broader question. Dwane and Doug, is an interesting case, and we appreciate your perspective very much.
My pleasure.